I'll just say what we already established prior. So I'm thinking just 10 to 20 minutes to introduce each topic, and then you can just freely debate after that. And then I think I didn't want to be like completely useless, so if you guys need me to fact check something, you can just say so. And then I'll try and take like a back seat, but if there's something I need to clarify for maybe like the audience, I'll write down like some questions and follow up after each topic.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Which one do we want to start first?
I'm cool with whatever. I'm cool with whatever.
Okay. Which one was? Did we established? Oh, okay. I'm just gonna. Let's see. Okay, this is the ones you put, Chase. Just put that back up. Or wait a minute. All right, so I think the first one is reform or revolution the appropriate way forward for the Trump administration?
Shall we start there?
Here, let me start. Let
That's
me
a
just
good one.
let me introduce. Now that we have that, let me introduce it for the audience. Okay, so for this episode, we're gonna have two of my friends, Chase and Connor. Connor's been on here, who knows how many times. And Chase and Connor both have like equal amounts of knowledge, but believe kind of like opposite things. So the first question is reform or revolution the appropriate way forward for the Trump administration? What do you guys think?
Do you want to start, Connor, or do you want me to?
You go first, Chase.
Yeah, sounds great. I believe revolution, the only reasonable course of action forward from the Trump administration. I would like to outline my viewpoint my take with a few viewpoints. First of all, I believe that the military apparatus of the United States has inflicted a massive amount of suffering on the world, and I do not believe reform a way to prevent military atrocities. Second of all, I believe that we aren't in a democracy, and that must be established via popular will, via revolution. And then I'd say third of all, it is because we are essentially the imperial core, right? We are the center of global capitalism. It's our duty to have a revolution so people in countries oppressed by the United States can finally experience freedom. So to go further into each of those points, the United States has over 200 military bases worldwide. Most of them are in countries we have had military action with in the past, whether it be Palestine, that we have military bases on, whether it be South Korea, whether it be Japan. All of those countries have essentially been put into a stranglehold by the United States, where they are both reliant and subservient on the United States for defense. To touch on the second point of democracy, I believe that the electoral systems in the United States are designed to work for the two-party system of Republicans and Democrats, right? So, Trump hypothetically gets impeached and removed, gets replaced by a Democrat. That doesn't change our broken elections. It doesn't change our broken districting system. It doesn't change our electoral college where, representatives can just bypass us. It doesn't get rid of the problem of money in politics. And I don't believe you can get money out of politics without revolution, because it has been extremely popular in the United States for there to be congressional stock trading bans, lobbying bans, but yet nothing happens. And I would say it's because our politicians are servants of money rather than us. We're not a democracy. And also, the third point, to right the wrongs of U.S. military intervention and to end neocolonialism. The United States dollar is the reserve currency for the entire world. That means that brokers basically in the United States get to determine the price of dollars in Algeria, in Japan, in wherever, right? We're the ones that determine the value, and I believe that a reformist approach will not get rid of the hegemony of the dollar. So those are my 3 points. Basically ending conflict, for democracy, righting our wrongs. I think that's probably enough. So I'm, going to pass the question on to my friend Connor here.
Okay. Can you just restate the question one time really quick?
Is
reform or revolution the necessary way forward from the Trump administration?
Okay, thank you. So, you brought up some good points about the actions of our country and its position as the global hegemon, which I think is a benefit to the world. I think this is an age of unparalleled peace and prosperity across the globe. It might not seem like that, but our liberal world order, which we established following the defeat of Nazism and communism, has brought peace on levels unseen before. Europe is at the longest stretch of peace that it's ever been. Developing nations all over the world are less of risk of being invaded by their neighbors. There's some benefit to having a world where you can't just violate the dictates of America without getting invaded. There's some atrocities that have been prevented by that, and some that have been committed by poor people in power. But I think America is a pretty effective democracy. Trump, as much as we don't like him, was chosen by the people, and that's why he's leading us and why he has all the power, because the American people wanted him to have the power. I think he's clearly failed as a leader, and which is why we will vote him out in the midterms and replace him with a better candidate. I don't think it's hopeless for the future. Joe Biden was a pretty good leader. He was one of the most pro-worker presidents we've seen in a very long time. He helped bring down, passed some of the largest stimulus spending. Like a big issue with our democracy right now is that the Constitution specifically made lots of checks and balances, but those have sort of made it harder to pass legislation. But with the leadership of Joe Biden, we were able to get humongous infrastructure spending and recover the best recovery in the world from a horrible global pandemic that killed millions of people. And we were leading the world recovery until Donald Trump kind of destroyed that. Thank you.
All right. Let's do the debatey part. So I want to start out with some questions for you, specifically about the electoral process in the United States. Do you believe that the primary election is free and fair, or democratic, right?
The primary election for the president?
Oh, sorry, the general election. Yeah, sorry about that. Do you believe that the elections for president are free and fair?
I think they're free, but they're specifically designed in a way to kind of protect the interests of minority groups in the country. Like the rich are a minority group, and the framers specifically laid out the Constitution in a way that would help protect them from the whims of the majority, which you might not like, but that's just the way it was set up, because liberalism believes everybody has equal value and equal claims to rights, and that we all deserve a basic, like, if I accumulate something, the government should be able to protect it. And it's not a direct democracy, and it's not supposed to be a perfect democracy, but it's supposed to be a union that would protect everyone's rights.
a republic.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. I'm just trying to start fucking honest. So I believe that the two-party system does not allow for democracy, as certain issues, like very specifically the conflict in Palestine, where there's the hostile occupying force of Israel, and then there's the Palestinian people who have been fighting and resisting for over 100 years against Zionist colonialism, right? The majority of Americans do not believe we should be sending military support to Israel. However, both sides of the aisle still do that. They still support it openly. And we can get into lobbying, which also I believe makes it so we don't have a democracy, because capital is what allows people to be elected, right? If I wanted to run for president, I had the best campaign. It was the most popular one. I did census polling, etc. I found the most popular positions. I wouldn't be able to get anything done. I wouldn't even be able to be primaried, because of the two-party system and because of the financial constraints, which are, post-2014, Citizens United States has. Further from that, Citizens United, I think, is something that we should talk about, because people running for office can take corporate donations. They can take donations from political interests that are against the wishes of the majority of Americans, right? So how would you solve the Israel-Palestine conflict with liberalism?
I think it's very rare for a candidate to switch their positions completely after being given money. There's people willing to give out money for almost any side of an issue. If I like the climate, I care about the environment. There are groups and PACs that would fund that. It's just not as popular. I mean, it is popular now. We have taken steps towards that. But for like the Palestine issue, it wasn't a super unpopular position during the election season. Like back in 2024, there was plenty of people who would not support Israel, but there's a major subset of the population that believe Israel literally has to exist for Jesus Christ to return. So it's not like Americans are all against this. The older generation are the primary generation that will vote. They have the highest voter turnout, and they're more likely to support Israel and overlook some of their atrocities. I would solve this by probably sitting down with Netanyahu or trying to get a meeting with him and telling him he has to either integrate Palestine completely or let them go, because you can't have it like halfway. You can't be like keeping them in like a semi-occupied, semi-autonomous, like, oh, we're not responsible for them, but we also won't let them do this and that. You either have to fully incorporate them and make them like citizens of your liberal democracy, or you need to like kick them out and just let them have their own country, because you can't. What they're doing right now is untenable and probably evil, arguably.
Well, it is an apartheid state against Palestinians. I mean, we don't even have to argue about that. It's a definitional thing. I think that the people of Palestine deserve the right of self-determination. They should be allowed to elect whatever governance they see fit. And I don't believe that the Israeli state has an inherent right to exist, as does any other state. It's about the popular will of the people. If a government is unpopular, it should not exist, per se, because what gives them the right to exist? It's their own power, it's their own violence, which gives them that right to exist, right? I believe that liberal answer is not going to stop the apartheid against Palestinians. There's no reasoning with Netanyahu. That's a man who's overseen the brutal execution, murder of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians just in his term. Is that someone you even want to reason with?
It's something we'd have to, because they have the military technology. They have a lot of influence. They're very popular. among wide spreads of our population. We can't just cut them off. I mean, we can, but I'm saying I think it'd be more effective to give them like a hard red line they can't cross and actually just work from there. Because I feel like if Israel fully integrated Palestine into their country and gave them all liberal rights and actually started like building infrastructure in Palestine like their regular territory, not just like this weird apartheid annex, then the lives of the people there would be significantly improved. Because Arabs living in Israel are sometimes mistreated, but they generally have actual rights.
Okay. Do you... Why don't Palestinians have rights? Why aren't they included in this liberal democracy?
Well, the ones living in Israel generally do. It's just that they don't consider the West Bank and Gaza like full blown, incorporated territories of Israel. They're not under the jurisdiction of the government. So it's like how somebody in Canada has human rights, but they don't have American like citizenship rights, and they're not like afforded all the same protections as an American citizen would be.
But that would be like if Canada invaded the United States, partitioned off California, and then said that these Californians have to obey by the law or get shot in any law. Like, so I have a further question for you. When in history, right? Let's go off of history because I think that's the best basis for future decision making. When in history has an apartheid state ended without violence of the oppressed against the oppressor?
Against the oppressor. Okay.
Huh?
I can't think of an example off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's because Israel would not include the Palestinians in their liberal democracy because they would seek to overthrow it and replace it with something that hasn't already killed, millions of them. I believe that, of course, violence is not a first response. I think it's the last response. But I think that when a group of people have been treated with extraordinary violence, disproportionate violence, by people who have superior technology, superior weapons, I believe that those people who are oppressed have the right to fight and resist. And also, Israel didn't exist 80 years ago. It can sure as hell not exist tomorrow if we were to stop funding them, right? It's the American taxpayer that allows for the settler colonial project to continue, right? So let's put our thinking caps on. Why does the United States want to fund Israel, right? It's not because it's a liberal democracy, because we funded dictators before. Like, let's talk South Korea in the 50s. Let's talk Japan in the 50s. Let's talk dozens of other places in the 50s and 60s where we installed fascist dictators, right? We, of course, with our financial support for other countries, do not require liberal democracy. We require subservience to the United States and our interests. I believe the reason why Israel exists and why people say it has the right to exist is to enable further military action and funding in the Middle East for the profit of a few rich oil fuckers. So that's why I believe the project of Israel has to end, and I believe that is a part of why we need revolution, because it's been shown that both sides will keep funding Israel, will keep corroborating with Israeli officials, even if it's extraordinarily unpopular, because from AIPAC, right? It's a full circle where the United States funds Israel, Israel funds the politicians fund it for further military expansion in the Middle East. Again, Israel didn't exist 80 years ago, but 80 years ago, you know what happened? End of World War II, like we were talking about, the creation of this new great liberal world order where there hasn't been, dramatic violence. Oh, wait, but let's think about that, right? Is there peace in Europe? because I would say there certainly has not been, and I think even right now, there's a massive war going on, right? I think liberal democracy has failed on every account to stop war, and I think the reason why is because liberal democracy encourages war because it's economically beneficial. It is the most economically beneficial thing. It produces so much capital for those in charge. This endless expansion of war and this endless war, this cycle of war, right? When has the United States not been militarily intervening in a country? Name a single year or decade where the United States hasn't had some type of military intervention.
Would that be 2022 after the pullout in Afghanistan or something? I don't know. If you don't count giving aid to Ukraine or like peacekeeping operations, and like
there were strikes in Yemen and Lebanon against Hezbollah and other organizations, right? And I'm not going to necessarily be like, oh, we should just leave them alone. But there has been military action constantly from the end of World War II till now. So let's get into some of my favorite examples of this military action and why I think it warrants revolution, right? Korea. 3 million Koreans killed, 20% of all infrastructure destroyed, 80% in areas like Pyongyang. Let's talk Vietnam. Another 2 to 3 million people killed in these wars of intervention, right? Because the Vietnamese and Korean people didn't ask for our intervention, right? Other than, ding, 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 the rich capitalist classes in those countries, right? Millions of people are dead because of liberal democracy. I think the idea that liberal democracy creates peace is false, just inherently false because of history, right? I wish liberal democracy worked because the promise that, oh, you're a rational person, so therefore we can trust you with voting in politicians to represent you, right? It doesn't work when we have a two-party system and we have an oligarchy. And that's why I believe that a revolution to be necessary to prevent further incidents such as Vietnam, Korea. Even what's going on in Iran right now is a perfect example. The Iranian people have never waged war on us. Name a single time they bombed one of our places first, right? We've bombed Iran a multitude of times completely unprovoked, right? It's liberal democracy. Let's even get into some of my favorite figures from this liberal democracy, right? Let's take Obama, right? You know what Obama did in Libya?
Yeah, you guys don't like it, what he did in Libya.
Well, it's not that I don't like it. It's that there's 1.5 million Libyans who died who probably didn't like it. And there's millions more who are suffering now because they don't have the same benefits of, like, free education, free electricity, money when you get married, money when you have kids, right? Those programs don't exist anymore because liberal democracy came in to Libya, right? Liberal democracy intervened against this bad dictator, but the dictator didn't kill millions of people. We did. So I think our military intervention since World War II is the most damning thing against the system of liberal democracy, which I would not even consider to be democracy in the first place.
Could you elaborate on what happened in Libya, just for anyone who's unfamiliar?
Oh, yeah, there was this motherfucker named Gaddafi. He was straight chiller, a little eccentric, but he came to power through democracy, and he decided to do some things like, hey, we're going to nationalize the resources, so the people of Libya get to keep them. He said that, I think that the next generation should have better education. Massive literacy programs spiked the literacy rate by, I think, 30% from like 34 to 64. I don't know if my numbers are correct, so you could check me on that. The literacy massively improved, life expectancy massively improved, and we killed them. We killed Gaddafi, and we replaced it with essentially a puppet government for the United States. The liberal democracy, that was so great. And feel free to research more in Libya from both sides, of fucking course. But it is really disheartening what happened to the people of Libya under the Obama administration. Also, I think we should talk something like a little different, because I think I'm kind of beating a dead horse saying that the United States military intervention is unjustified and brutal and disgusting genocide, right? I believe that we have never held the country accountable for slavery. In fact, slavery still exists, right? We have the largest prison in all of history, and as a part of the 13th Amendment, we include slavery as punishment for a crime. Slavery is outlawed unless you're punished for a crime, right? Oh, but black and brown people are far more disproportionately likely to be convicted of crimes, even though it's not inherent that they are more criminal. It's inherent that they are over-policed, right? So the police system is another way that I'd say that we don't have democracy and we have institutionalized slavery. Let's talk further from this. Do you know what happened in the country right south of Mexico? I'm like totally blanking right now. Guatemala. Do you know what happened in Guatemala in the 50s?
My South American history is pretty poor. Could you explain?
Yeah, of course. So basically, there was this company called United Fruit Company, right? They owned 60% of the land in Guatemala. They owned the only major port. They owned the railways, all of the railways, right? And then this leader got democratically elected in Guatemala, and he's like, hey, wait. Hold the phone, right? This fruit company is basically enslaving our people, taking our land. So I think that we should just take away the land that they're not using, right? You know what happened to that motherfucker? U.S.-backed coup. Do you know about the Iran-Contra affair?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
treason against America, though.
Huh?
I think that was arguably treason against America, though.
What happened to Reagan? Did we hold him accountable?
No.
No, we just, wait, what's the, there's one song from American Dad that says the name the whole time, but the general who was in charge of it, he's free now. I saw him on Fox News the other fucking day talking about we shouldn't send missiles to Iran. The same motherfucker that illegally sold missiles to Iran. That was treasonous, right? No one was held accountable other than Oliver Lee. Yes, that motherfucker.
Wait, wasn't it Oliver North? Sorry.
Oliver North, yeah. He was the only one held accountable, and now he's a free man. Let's talk even like further back. Was a single person punished for slavery? A single person.
Probably not.
No, not a single person was held accountable for slavery. Did you know that I almost said Hill and Hillary Clinton. Bill and Hillary Clinton had slaves, and they bragged about it. Did you know this?
They bragged about having slaves? That's pretty insane.
Yeah, and it was prison laborers who they openly talked about being mostly black, right? They were housekeepers from prisons that were paid $0 an hour, right? I think that's pretty damn fucked up. And that motherfucker was the president, and the other motherfucker was the only option against Trump in 2016. That's where liberal democracy takes us, right? I think that the two-party system is so fucking evil, they must be abolished. Because we, in this last election, had to vote between two people who supported genocide in Palestine, right? We need to talk about what's happening in Sudan right now. Basically, the United Arab Emirates, right? The Crown Prince of the UAE, he contracted this group called the RSF to go into Sudan and acquire land, right? The same shit that we were doing to Native Americans, basically. The RSF comes in with guns to a agrarian village, says, hey, this is property of the UAE now, or the RSF, depending, right? And if they don't just leave, you know what happens to them? Shooting them. Genocide currently ongoing, that, of course, Trump isn't doing anything about, but, fuck Trump. I think that we don't have to feel like Trump's an evil person. But this is all to say that the only other option to Trump would have been genocidal too. And in 2016, the other option was somebody who bragged about slavery, whose great-grandparents made a fucking killing off of slavery. Sorry, that was Bill's. But this is all to say that the crimes of our country and our liberal democracy far outweigh any potential good that they may have caused, right? And let's segue into something else, right? Let's talk about 1930s China, right? 1.3 billion people, 90% of whom are in extreme poverty, right? In the last 40 years, China has been able to lift 800 million people out of extreme poverty, right? I think that's a far greater feat accomplishment than liberal democracy's ever secured. What's the even comparable feat that liberal democracy has had?
Are you talking about industrialization?
Well, liberal democracy didn't do industrialization. I would say that was
the capitalist system under liberal democracy. It was terrible. It was a terrible experience for the people during industrialization, I imagine, but better for us in the end.
Yeah, but what is this?
Wait. Mm-hmm. Sorry. You just said a ton of stuff. I'd just like to respond to a few of the things.
Yeah, of course.
What was the first thing you said? The intervention in Libya under Obama. I think that was a much. I think that was a much more rational choice than what Trump is doing. If I remember correctly, there was a UN resolution saying that so that the world voted on this. Everyone decided that taking action would be justified because to prevent massacres. I can't remember who he was going to massacre.
If you wanted to respond to a few of Chase's points, he mentioned Libya. He mentioned the U.S. prison system. He also mentioned, I think, some points on liberal democracy, and then China. Just to rack your brain.
Okay. So, there's been a lot of wars because we're trying to shape the world in a way we would like to see it. America has intervened in a lot of different places. Some of those places we've been less effective in our policies. We've had less defined goals. I don't think people are bombing for bombing's sake because you can you can just build tons of military equipment. You don't have to actually drop the bombs. You could have just an enemy and justify building all that stuff. I think a lot of this stuff was motivated by good intentions, like when we intervened in Serbia or we intervened in Libya. Millions of people didn't die in Libya. I can't remember how many. I think it was 10,000 people, which is awful. But sometimes you have to do things to prevent massacres. Because let's take, for example, where was the genocide against the Tutsis? What country was that?
Tutsis?
The Tutsis.
Zimbabwe?
Rwanda. Rwanda genocide.
Oh.
We could have intervened there, but we chose not to. I forgot who was the president. He chose not to intervene, and then 1.5 million people were slaughtered. So after that, we were a little more.
Well, what about
excited to intervene
Vietnam
in places? Vietnam is a pretty dark story because it was height of the Cold War. Global superpowers fighting for hegemony. There was a popular support across the entire United States. Pretty broad belief that communism was a threat to the world and that it had to be stopped. There was people in South Vietnam obviously willing to fight for us. The first forces in there were actually the French, and then the U.S. Special Forces bringing weapons to the South Vietnam fighters, trying to fight for what they believed was their freedom. The people in the North, there's atrocities on both sides. I think Vietnam is a fine country today. I think we were there too long. We didn't have clear objectives. The tent offensive kind of destroyed any momentum. We were doomed to lose. Well, I don't think it was evil to try and intervene. I think some military action is good sometimes. The Soviet Union, they went into Afghanistan, killed 1 million people, and accomplished nothing, and they bankrupted their empire and collapsed.
Well, there's a little more nuance to there, because what about the millions of Afghanis the United States killed, right? And also,
I think you're referring to Iraq because we didn't kill millions of Afghanis. We killed like 50,000 Taliban fighters, and a couple 100,000 people died in the fighting, if I remember correctly. But I think 1 million people have died in Iraq because that was an evil action. I don't believe in the invasion of Iraq. That was fueled by anger and hatred following a terrorist attack. 9/11, people were really angry. There's a quote. Actually, I have it saved on the Discord server. I'll pull it up. There's a quote from a talk radio show where he explains why we went into Iraq. And it's literally just to like fuck up random Muslims. It's basically like I'll find it later, but that's basically why we went to Iraq. There was no actual good intentions behind that. But any country, like it doesn't matter if you're a true democracy, a dictatorship. If like the people in charge get angry, so the people got angry, they're gonna go do some evil things.
But the United States is the main provocateur in all of these situations, right? Because what happened in Vietnam and Korea is that there was popular rising for communism, right? And we went to Vietnam, as you said, to fight communism because that was a very popular thing, right? But why the fuck was that our take, right? When did the Vietnamese get to vote on an American invasion? When did the Koreans get to vote on an American invasion? When did, et cetera, like, go on to Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan? Of course, we can talk about Congo. We can talk about nearly every country in South America that's had U.S. military intervention.
I think the people of Vietnam voted with their actions. They chose to fight. They were overwhelmed by the superior military intervention. Like the Soviets provided more equipment than we did.
The French was calling them, and then because the French were losing money, we came in and intervened. Right? The Vietnamese never asked for that. Their actions of independence aren't enough to justify military action, like at all. I think that they were truly just fighting for independence. That was what started with the French and then ended with the Americans, and they did successfully fight for independence. Communist leadership took hold, and you said it yourself. They're doing great now. And thank God the United States isn't leading them, because let's compare that to Japan. Japan, the workers' conditions are terrible. We installed a far-right dictator in the 1950s in Japan. We installed their basically entire government. Now the Japanese people...
But their government was a far-right dictatorship, so we can't just change the culture of their country overnight. So, like, they had, like, a death cult, like, imperial head, like, we had to be careful how we managed that, because we wanted to rehabilitate Japan without, like, causing, like, a rebellion. We wanted to just, like, stop fighting. It was like, hey, it's time to rebuild Japan. I think we did a pretty good job without being too, you'd expect, like, we totally obliterated their country. You'd expect we would have been a little more selfish, a little more, like, getting our fingers deep in their, like, system. I think Japan is a pretty strong, independent country today. I live there today. It's a beautiful place. Mm-hmm. And I think the Japanese people are better off now than they would be under, like, the emperor or, like, super authoritarian, far-right, imperialist.
Emperor was evil. Yeah, sorry. Japan kind of, like... That was more just to show, like, workers' conditions under U.S. leadership. Like, same thing with South Korea. Because it's, like, just not... It's very, very toxic work culture there. And I think that that's very negative. But work culture is...
I think you would justify those things if it was a different regime. Like, if they were a regime that you liked, you'd be able to justify, well, they're developing... They're trying to build up a prosperous nation. There's going to be... It's happened in every country that's industrialized. America in the 1890s, you'd work like 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and like your arm would get ripped off by a machine, and you'd have to like keep working. They'd lock people in the factory rooms. When the factory's caught on fire, they wouldn't be able to leave. Like industrialization is a very messy, inhuman process because it's not natural to be like this. But you gotta like force this state. Anyone trying to achieve it is going to be like horrendous conditions. So I don't think it's like purely a liberal democracy fault. Just that any country attempting to industrialize will have that happen.
But in the United States, what other countries do, and that's kind of my entire issue, is that I believe that the Japanese people, even though they had of course, far-right imperial dictatorship, I believe that they should have been the ones to determine what government they have. Same exact thing in Korea, same thing in Vietnam, but we interfered, and that's my biggest gripe with neoliberal democracy, or liberal democracy.
But would they have been free to intervene, or, like, just decide their own fate if we just stayed out completely? Would they have been, like, completely free from, like, foreign influence if we just sat that out and just let other countries? No, they would have been turned into a satellite state of probably either China or the Soviet Union. And the countries that were satellite states of the Soviet Union are not doing too well today. They're pretty far behind in development.
Wait, what happened to them?
What happened to them?
Yeah,
well, their empire collapsed, and the Soviet Union was using them for resources and didn't really care about their people. Just sort of like the American Empire.
So, I just want to bring something up, right? Because we talk about freedom under liberal democracy. At the end of World War II, let's go to 1920s, right? In the 1920s, there was still Jim Crow in the United States. Women's voting was a complicated issue at the time. But, it's funny, the USSR had a right to work for all people, had equal rights for women, had equal rights for people regardless of skin color. I think that was...
the Bolsheviks, which was brave. Like, you couldn't do that in America at the time because the support would have not been democratic. Like, the democracy wouldn't have chosen to do that because the people wouldn't want that. And the Bolsheviks, even though their name means the majority, they weren't the majority. They couldn't form a majority government. They were a minority, and that's why they had to suppress certain elections. But that allows you to do something like that. Like, you could say, hey, we're mandating women's rights because we don't care about the will of the people. We're just going to do this, which is arguably a good thing. But you can't do that in, like, a democracy. It had to be an undemocratic action.
Yeah, because in democracy, the minorities just suffer and burn and work as slaves.
Well, that's why America isn't a pure democracy. The framers took steps to prevent that, or attempts to prevent that.
Precisely, and still, I don't think there's equal rights. Still, I think there's slavery, and I think that the slavery does affect people broadly of different races, but disproportionately affects people that are black and brown. And of course, I'm not like the biggest USSR glazer. I merely admire the humanitarian impact of the 20s through 50s and their industrialization, because they went from a feudal, backward, Tsarist society to a global superpower with 99% literacy, better than we can ask for now. They had equal rights for women, equal rights for people of different skin colors. They had a guaranteed right to work, guaranteed right to housing, right? That's something we don't even have now. I think the USSR had better human rights in the 20s than the United States has now, or more equal human rights, right? And that's not to say that there weren't people who were suffering, because, no shit, there were. But when it comes to liberal democracy, providing people equal rights, the track record is so terrible. Like, equal rights in liberal democracies are kind of a new concept, right? Even until the 60s, the United States didn't have equal rights. And even then, there was still massive racial oppression through things like zoning laws, through, of course, the prison industrial complex. Like, I genuinely think that the United States is evil. Like, the government has been evil, and they have been since the start, right? And let's talk, okay, here's my little trump card, right? Motherfucker Epstein, right? Why?
I like this one because I don't believe in it.
Act on this, right? Because everyone from fucking Bill Clinton until Joe Biden had complete and full access to the information. Their DOJs had the information.
Joe Biden didn't.
Et cetera. Huh?
Joe Biden didn't, though.
Oh, yes, he fucking did.
It's sealed under court order. You can't meddle with files in an ongoing investigation, and Ghislaine Maxwell was currently under trial for what had happened, so Joe Biden couldn't access the files. And there probably isn't much evidence in the files. If you read Jeffrey Epstein's suicide note that was just released a couple days ago, he says that they investigated me for 15 months, they found nothing. That's why they're hitting me with old charges. He covered his tracks. Yeah, I know. It's pretty unpopular take. Not many people have read the Epstein stuff as closely as I have. So, I'd love to talk about this. I love this topic. It's a good one to talk about.
Oh, lordy lord.
I'm just going to pause there. If we want to get into the Epstein stuff, do we want to make that a separate question? Because I have a few follow-up questions from our discussion up to this point.
Let's hit your follow-ups, because
Okay.
honestly...
Yeah, this is a massive thing, so I think this is kind of like a transitions us from whether or not we should have reform or revolution in response to the Trump administration. So I'll ask a few questions, and you guys can have kind of like a closing statement on reform or revolution. So the first question I have is for Connor. You mentioned that Israel, what you would do is you'd sit down with Netanyahu, negotiate with him, draw a red line, and say, you either integrate Palestine and give them, good treatment, or you let them be a separate state. If you're familiar with the Greater Israel Project, is that what it's called, Chase? The Greater Israel.
Yes.
So if you're familiar with that, they've shown to be an expansionist country. How would you negotiate with Netanyahu, knowing that their goal as a country is imperialism?
Well, yeah, that's the problem, because neither side wants that solution. The Palestinians don't want to be relegated to that smaller chunk of territory, but that's kind of what happens when you lose wars over and over again. And the Israelis don't want to integrate the Palestinians because the Palestinians would probably not outvote them, because they wouldn't. There's 7.5 million Jews in Israel, I believe, and there's how many Palestinians? But they would have a significant sway in their government. They'd probably the Orthodox Jews and the hardliners wouldn't want that. But that's the only real solution, because if we just let Israel continue on like this, Palestine will just suffer forever. If Israel doesn't if Israel is allowed to continue on, I think it'll just keep making the situation worse.
So
somebody has to do something about it. The best solution is not going to be pretty.
I don't believe that Israel should exist, because it has been the most aggressive state in the Middle East. Iran hasn't started a single war of attrition. They haven't done any preliminary strikes, right? They haven't done anything like that ever. You don't know who has? Israel. They bombed all their fucking neighbors, right? They violated ceasefires over and over and over. If Trump can't convince Netanyahu to chill out on Lebanon, you think you can tell him to chill out on Palestine? No, because the government policy is that Palestine is Israel, right? Israel has claim to all of Palestine, as well as areas of Lebanon, areas of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, etc. They claim all of that land. So that is why Israel does not have a right to exist, and they should be abolished, right? Because you want to know what? Palestine has had equal rights for Jews for fucking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Jews have been able to live peacefully in Palestine the whole time. Revert the control of the Palestinians. They're the ones who are on that land, right? That would be like...
Maybe not today, though.
American
the culture would be very different. Culture under the British occupation of Palestine and the previous rule would probably be very different than the rule today if the Hamas... Because Hamas was popularly elected. If Hamas was running Palestine, there would certainly be a genocide against the Jews. It would be unavoidable if they were given control over it.
Hamas is the most reactionary government ever, because do you want to know what happened to the other governments in Palestine?
Yeah, they were killed. Whatever.
The PLSF? They got fucking nuked. Israel didn't allow their governments to exist. Israel doesn't allow the West Bank to have a government in the first place, right? The Hamas thing is a very interesting question, because it's like, I don't support Hamas. They are reactionary, right-wing fucking extremists, right? But the reason why they're at that point is because they've been genocided for 80 years, and they're not allowed to have a different form of government. And you know what's funny? Israel has actually been caught supporting Hamas over and over and over. like, again,
I've heard that. Like, I've looked into those claims. They're, like, money is going to, like, indirectly to Hamas. Like, people say, "Oh, America funded the Taliban by giving money to the jihadists and whatever." Like, they're not like, it's not like a conspiracy to fund Hamas.
I have another question. Was that everything you wanted to say?
I'm chill.
Okay. All right. So this next question is for you.
You can move on to the next question.
The next question is for you, Chase. So you mentioned that the U.S. and Israel are working together, basically. What does bipartisan approval of Israel benefit from? Like, what's the specific process? Why does the United States benefit from working with Israel? Why shouldn't they just say, well, screw you guys, you're genociding people? What's the specific rationale on their part?
Think of it as the largest military base in the world, because from border to border, the illegitimate state of Israel is extremely heavily armed. They test our brand new weapons, right? For example, there's this thing called Project Lavender, right? Have you heard of this?
Yes.
Yeah, whereas basically Palantir software that would detect people they flagged as threats, even though they didn't commit any crimes, in the Israeli Air Force, once they got the go-ahead that, oh, this person's a threat, they bomb them. So it's, first of all, for the purpose of military domination of the Middle East. Second of all, because every bomb that falls is dollars and dollars, millions of dollars, going towards the arms industry, which we all know our politicians benefit massively from. And then third of all, because it helps strengthen the concept of liberal democracy, right? Because Israel is a liberal democracy, right? They're the freest place in the Middle East, right? But they have fucking apartheid, right? So it just benefits U.S. military interest, financial interest, and political interest. That's what I'd say.
All right. Do you want to respond to that, Connor, before we move on to the next one?
Israel, I do think they do provide good cyber warfare assets. They're really good at that. They're really good with their intelligence agency. The Mossad is probably the best government intelligence agency any country has. For a while, they were kind of like a force that allowed us to exercise our influence in the Middle East while promoting something that most Americans at the time agreed with. I think today the popular support has completely shifted from Israel, so I don't think we will be seeing many politicians running on the promises of defending Israel for national elections. But we might, because while I've talked to a lot of young people who don't like Israel, and I don't like Israel, and most of the online discourse is against Israel, I'd imagine there's plenty of support in America for God's chosen people in the Middle East, because the Bible condones genocides against the Midianites. I'm sure it's not very hard to just look over Palestine and just support Israel anyway, if you're a Christian.
Yeah, and it sounds like we're on the same page here. I mean, it wasn't really a debate question, it's kind of just a clarification, so sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. But yeah, this sounds good. Next question is for you, Connor. What would constitute military action? We mentioned, I think Chase mentioned like we were talking about U.S. intervention in other countries, and what I would want to know is what would constitute that action? Is it inherently antagonistic? Would, for example, the United States was in Germany up until a week ago. Would that, but we just have bases across the globe. Is that inherently antagonistic, or does that constitute military action, or is that in a separate category?
There's military bases in America from other countries. Like when I was at Fort Sill, there was plenty of people from like all sorts of countries. I saw people in Philippines uniforms. I saw people in South Africans, like all sorts of like people. It's like, because we're a global world order, we have allies everywhere in all sorts of countries. They like having Americans there. The people on bases will stimulate local economies around them by just spending the money they make in those towns. Having America in your country is a pretty good way to make sure you don't get invaded. Nobody's ever invaded. Well, that's not true, but no liberal democracy has ever invaded another liberal democracy, which is a pretty good track record.
Well, it's almost like go together for the same goal of making sure that the richer stay rich.
I mean, rich people are always going to want to stay rich, but they're competing with each other too. They're not like working together. You got the rich people because Donald Trump. If you look at the 2016 Republican primary to like pick their candidate, he was not favored to win. The capital interests recognized him as a threat. They knew he was going to destabilize everything, probably be bad for the capital interests, but the people of America, the Republicans, are retarded, and they chose him. So they had to just roll with it. And it can look like everything is going part of the plan, like all the capitalists are in like a global conspiracy because they can always benefit from every situation that unfolds. But I think they're just really good at adapting. Anything that happens, you can take it and roll with it, and that's how you... and you also have to have a lot of capital. If you have a lot of capital and can adapt to new changes, you can become a billionaire.
But there is a neoliberal world order, whether you call it the UN, IMF, etc. All of these organizations meant to govern the world are, first of all, headed by the United States, but propped up by its allies. Even things such as NATO are proof that is massive cohesion among the ruling classes of different neoliberal nations, right? Where the prime minister...
That's a good one to bring up because there's a lot of disagreement in NATO across the different countries on what spending, what actions should be taken. You know, we have Turkey, we have Hungary, and like countries like in the EU that like aren't super on board with everything we're doing. They like some of them are like more pro-friendly to Russia. Like NATO is trying to like secretly give, not secretly, but they're trying to like give Ukraine aid without like antagonizing Russia too much, like trying to like aggravate them to like war with NATO. But then we have like people like Hungary who are like, oh, if Ukraine bombs Russian oil fields, we'll cut off all natural gas to Ukraine. And we're like, what the fuck? You're supposed to be our allies. You're in our alliance. Like, there's no like universal consensus. It's more of like a general.
Well, the universal consensus is that the rich must stay rich, right? All of them are anti-communist, right? Notice how all of the countries in NATO are directly against communism, right? Notice how all of the countries in NATO are ran and controlled by rich oligarchs, right? It's almost like communism threatens the ruling class because it takes power from those who already have it.
And so does fascism. Fascism takes power from the people and gives it to a new set of rulers. But it doesn't automatically make it a superior option. Just switching hands of who's in charge. Yeah, you have to have a long-term plan. You could say the Soviet Union was able to industrialize and increase literacy rates, and that's all good. But if your country can't last, it's not really useful. You're not doing anything. It's like Rojava. It's like they were like those anarchists in northern Syria. It's like they had like women's rights in Syria, and they had lots of they had free healthcare and they had free education, but they couldn't protect themselves, and they were kind of getting massacred by Turkey.
Oh, but who massacred? And Turkey's a part of the capitalist order, right? They're a part of the UN, right? They never condemned Turkey and Syria, right? It's almost like when you return power to the hands of the people, it goes away from the rich billionaires and multimillionaires who actually pull the strings. And that's why I think that socialism is so far preferable, because let's look at China, right? They have people who have extreme wealth, right? If you're an entrepreneur in China, you can become extraordinarily successful. Oh, but nobody's homeless, nobody's hungry, nobody's thirsty, nobody doesn't get an education, nobody doesn't get health care. Go further upon it, they all get the right to great transportation, right? things like that, I would say, are proof that socialist China's approach has worked, right? You're saying, like, oh, the USSR collapsed, and that's proof that they shouldn't necessarily exist, or they weren't bound to exist, right? How about China, man? They're doing even better than we are at capitalism, and they're fucking commies.
Well, they're not commies. I think it's kind of in name only. Like Deng Xiaoping, what's his name?
Deng Xiaoping.
Deng Xiaoping's reforms saved the country because you need market forces to guide innovation.
Yeah.
And they have the unliberal government, so they have the liberal markets, unliberal government. That doesn't mean like
liberal government. Hold on, what's the
basis of that? Government.
Do we want to save whether or not China is communist for the next question after Epstein, because that's the one we outlined earlier.
Yeah,
wait, I just wanted to finish what I was saying about China. It's like
yeah,
China,
finish your thoughts.
They have 33% of their healthcare expenditure is out of pocket, if I remember correctly, which is I think 12% in America, or like 14%. Like they are socialized, but they're not socialist. They're just a kind of a market economy with direct down control from the top, which is useful for people who live in the cities. Like, hey, you're getting your funding because Xi Jinping can just say this happens, and the government's job is just to make it happen, which is pretty efficient. I guess isn't like as nice if you live in Tibet and you want to like not participate. You don't want to be part of the super industrialization, or you live in Mongolia and you don't want them to build a gas line through your lands. Like you can't really do anything about that.
Mongolia is a different country. We're talking about Inner Mongolia.
No, I was saying that China wants to build a pipeline through Mongolia to Russia, and it doesn't look like Mongolia is going to get any say in the matter, because more Mongolians live in China than in Mongolia. But whatever.
That is true. Yeah, Mongolia is an interesting. But let's go back to Tibet, right? Because there's no Uyghur genocide, and I'll say that with full confidence. That's completely fabricated by this motherfucker Adrian Zenz, who is funded by this thing. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, right? It was a group created by the CIA. There has been zero evidence, and in fact, all majority Muslim countries claim that there isn't a genocide in Tibet. As well as there being no evidence for a genocide in Tibet either. Just speculation.
Regardless of genocide denial, there's people living there that their interests are put to the side, like in any country. They like their traditional lifestyle. They don't want to live in super modernized, super industrialized.
You know what the traditional lifestyle was in Tibet, right? Do you know about the Dalai Lama?
Yes, the Dalai Lama.
Do you know about all the sex slavery that the Dalai Lama did in the 30s and before?
It's not good, but it's not good, but you don't have to.
95% of people live below the poverty line.
Sure.
And now
people
there
live
is poverty
below the poverty line for thousands of years. I don't think it's inherently superior to have lots of money. If you're
whoa. You think that people of Tibet don't prefer having economic opportunity and having not a theocratic dictator?
I mean, I'm sure some of them do. I'm sure some of them don't. But you can't really get their say in it because it's not up to them what happens to their people, their land. There's a top-down, no accountability. It's just, hey, we're going to build this here, we're going to build it. That's kind of like the trade-off you get with the super centralized government.
Yeah, the centralization, I think, is the best part of China, to be honest, because it successfully allows for local representation to happen and for the center to be able to acknowledge that. Like, the way that poverty has fallen is greater than anything any neoliberal country's ever done, right? Just the reduction of poverty in China alone under communist leadership has been great. And also, let's talk about, communist, not communist, right? It's a communist one-party system. It's a Marxist-Leninist Maoist party with a democratic centralism, right? But they'll openly admit that they have a center-right economy. The reason for this is that socialist communists believe the worker state, the socialist state, proletarian state, however you want to call it, is a method to combat the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, right? So the method that China is using is basically using international markets to gain access to resources and capital to wage better war against the ruling classes of other nations. And also they believe...
What is China doing to fight the ruling classes of other countries? What is China doing to fight the global bourgeoisie?
Well, I mean, first of all, offer an alternative to other systems, right? They participate in financial capital across the world where they, like, you know about the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yeah, but how is that fighting the ruling class of other countries? How is that changing the world order?
Because they would win World War III. Because they have the industrial might that we don't have. They can build 216 warships for every one the United States can build. It's like the most skewed thing because China is the industrial superpower, right? The United States just has technology.
But the global capitalists love working with China. They're not like...
and the Chinese love it too. Yeah. It's a win-win, but the Chinese come out on top. 100%. Because the Chinese have been coming out on top fairly consistently too. I mean, even with the Trump tariff thing, it was hilarious how hard a ball China was able to play, saying like, we do not need the United States, but you need us, right? And it's fucking true. China does not need the United States. We certainly need them. We need them for so much of our production, right? That's what China's goal has been, is rapid industrialization and technological innovation to put them into a position where they have the power, right? Because, I mean, this kind of goes back to Mao, but legitimately, it's like the people who decide things are the people who have power, and the reason why you get power is, violence, right? And they're able to wage war with the United States, I believe, to a massive degree. I believe their strategy is to wait for the United States to collapse, to be honest. That's why there hasn't been any actual heated aggression, but...
So they're an alternative system, but you said they were, like, challenging, like, the power of the elites, but the elites will just work with them. Like, when America collapses, all the elites are just going to transfer to working with China.
Well, yes, and, it's a very, very complicated topic that we can get into the nitty-gritty of.
And this kind of gets into whether or not China's capitalist or not, which we also have on the list.
They have a capitalist market with a communist leadership. It's like people who say, oh, China's capitalist. Let's do their capitalism then. Let's have a one-party democratic centralism state. I think that'd be fucking lovely. Like, I'd consider it a worker state. I wouldn't say it's communist, because communism is the when the conditions necessary for the liberation of the proletariat have been met, when private property has been abolished, and China needs to have more leverage to be able to do that, because obviously,
do they want to do that? Is there any inclination that they're going to do that?
I mean, of course, there's the chance that, there's kind of a government coup and then there's a new ruling class, but they still follow the principles of Marxism. They teach Marxism in schools. It's one of the most studied things in university there is Marxism, right? They stay true to the root of it. They just believe that the best way to combat the global bourgeoisie is through development of productive forces, to advance their means of production so far technologically that they have great automation. So I believe that's their goal. I don't know. I mean, nobody can really read their minds, but I do genuinely believe that China is fighting for the global working class.
I think they've pretty effectively, because you can't have your empire follow your peasants are starving. You need to have like a baseline. It's kind of common sense that most, I think, liberals have been pushing for. The Americans in particular have been against that since the 80s for some reason, because Americans don't believe in the government doing stuff, even though that's the whole point of having a government, is for it to do things. And if the American people wanted to have a system that provided a baseline for everyone, I think the American empire would become more secure and stable. I think the future for the Chinese empire is pretty bright, given that they...
Sunny red sun in the sky. It is bright, and I think it's because the leadership of the Communist Party, and I believe it's because they haven't abandoned Marxist principles. I believe that, in fact, they are the best at holding them, other than maybe North Korea, but that's a whole other thing. Oh my God.
Do we want one more question I have for you, Connor, is you mentioned that it was bad for us to go into Vietnam, and I think we all agree with that. But my specific question is, there was a regime change in Vietnam. We placed in a dictator of sorts. Would that change how we view military action in that country if we're the ones who caused it?
Well, there was already a war,
with the French, right?
Like was mentioned before, yeah. Like Vietnam had already been fighting for a while. They defeated the French pretty thoroughly. It's what the American people wanted. They didn't want to fight, but they wanted something to be done about the communism. So it's what they tried to do. They lost spectacularly, I think, undeniably. All of our military objectives failed in the end. I think we should look at it more differently next time we go in to intervene in a country. I think there was more success with Korea because there was a global coalition behind us, and we had a little more justification for what we were doing. I think just international consensus and what we do is the way to actually do proper military intervention. And I think it'd be wrong to just invade. Let's pick an evil country. I think it was just wrong for Trump to go in and kidnap Maduro without international support, because it undermines the world order. But if he had come together with the consensus of the world and said, "Hey, we're gonna go in and take Maduro and let the people of Venezuela have a new election," I think that would have been fine. But they didn't do that, and the people of Venezuela,
You're cutting out a bit,
interests were
Chase.
not taken into account.
Means morality or justification.
I think it
What
does.
even is international support? Because what are the international organizations which make these types of calls, right? Are they ones that are majority led by?
Hey, Chase, can you say
You're
that?
cutting out.
Yeah, can you say that thing again? We couldn't quite hear you.
Oh, am I good now?
Yes, good
There
now.
you are.
Okay, sweet. Well, the way that you're bringing it up, if we had international support, then it'd be okay. I don't think international support defines morality. I believe in the right of all peoples and nations to self-determination. I believe in democracy, right? I believe that the Venezuelans are the ones in charge of Venezuela's fate. It should not be our fucking call at all. And even if all the international courts determine, hey, let's get Maduro out of here, it doesn't mean it's moral. It doesn't mean it's moral at all whatsoever. In fact, I think that institutes a global order which reinforces capitalism, reinforces wealth disparity, reinforces this violence that's been going on forever. Because what was the international community doing to the United States in all of our atrocities? What have they done against us for supporting the genocide of Palestinians, supporting the genocide of so many other people, of the Koreans? Did you know that in the Korean War, there were more bombs dropped than in the entirety of the Pacific Theater in World War II?
Yep. Because they were trying to bomb out people hiding in the jungle. They didn't even know where they were. They were just bombing.
Exactly. I think that those people had the right to be able to create their own government and state, right? And the funny thing about Vietnam is because they won, they're able to have this independence. If the United States won, they would not be independent. It just goes to show how corrupt it is.
But Vietnam isn't like totally detached from the world order. I mean, they participate. They're more open to foreigners. They have the one-party rule. They have the mandated party, the only party that you can, the uniparty or whatever. But they're not like totally independent. Every single country involved in global trade is relying on each other. It's international.
But my point is more that the United States, when it gets its will militarily, it does not lead to the independence of people. I'd say the opposite. Like what happened in South Korea. We installed a brutal dictator. Like, we do not give a fuck about democracy. Liberal democracy is a goddamn illusion, I'll tell you that. Right? Because if in the United States, a majority of people in 2028 voted for a third-party president, our the Electoral College could just decide, man, fuck you guys. We're going with that person. So we'd have to get the entire congressional slate to be third party first, right? That seems like a really shitty democracy to me when it's like Hitler and Super Hitler are your two options for your elections, and that's the option we give other countries too.
I do think that is exaggerated, though. Like, the candidates aren't Hitler and Super Hitler. The candidates are, we're going to continue our recovery after the global pandemic. We're working towards building our infrastructure. We're trying to there's been damage caused by the last administration that we're going to undo. We need to reform the legislature. We need to probably get rid of, the filibuster so we can... There's things that need to be passed and, jobs that need to get done. But it doesn't change
our foreign policy. That doesn't change it hardly whatsoever, right? You know who said that she would invade Iran on day one? It was Hillary Clinton, right? Do you want to know who's never... literally both sides of the aisle still support genocide in Palestine. That's why I say it's Hitler versus Super Hitler, because I don't think scale is a thing. I don't think just because Hitler hit 6 million people that he was bad. I think it's because he was a genocidal maniac, and that's who I think Kamala is. I think she was a genocidal maniac. Same exact thing with Joe Biden. The fact that he stood by while there were innocent Palestinian children getting bombed shows where his moral compass is. I think it shows that he wasn't
just stand by, though. Netanyahu said he was terrible. If you see what Netanyahu said about
but
Joe Biden, he said Joe Biden was giving
in Israel, because Biden never called for the end of Israel. Biden never called for the emancipation.
Why would he call for the end of Why would he call for the end of a country that most of the voter base supported at the time?
Because they're genocidal. That's it. My morals say never genocide, right? It's not like an added, oh man, at least we're getting some reforms. We might get free healthcare, but kids are still getting bombed. Fuck that. Genuinely, fuck that shit. I will never be able to be complicit in genocide the same way Democrats and Republicans both happily are. The same way Kamala was. She was saying that she'd be a great ally for Israel. She was bragging about how much of an Israeli ally she would be. That, I'd say, some Hitler shit. Oh my God. And, of course, Hitler's just such an anomaly. People use him to... But I'm saying that it's genocide. Genocide is non-negotiable no matter what. And if our two options are genocide, we don't have a goddamn democracy, right? We can't vote on the important issues that actually affect people, right? Nobody got to vote on this war with Iran, right? In fact, most Trump supporters I've talked to about the war with Iran have been like, yeah, he's a fucking shill for Israel, Jewish cuck, whatever they say, right? They don't like it, right? And it's because genocide is non-negotiable, because it happens, right? Even if Biden says, oh, Netanyahu's terrible, this war has been going on too long, even the fact he didn't recognize it as genocide is too far. And that's also why I think the system's so fucked, because you want to know who won't say it's genocide? Bernie goddamn Sanders won't even say it's genocide, right? Jesus shit. That's so bad. There is no option where genocide doesn't happen, and that's, again, why I don't think we're a democracy. Also, further from that, local and state elections are even worse, because gerrymandering, because of bullshit committees that get created by state congresses that exist forever. this data center in Box Elder, I think, is a beautiful illustration of how little democracy we actually have, because it was such an unpopular thing. All of those county commissioners are going to get voted out, but they don't care because they're going to get fancy corporate jobs after, right? That's why I think it's so fucked up, and that's why I think we're not in a democracy. All of our representatives are fucked up, and both Democrats and Republicans are evil, right? Just because Democrats have a nicer face and they advocate for slightly more democratic policies, slightly better policies, I think that actually makes them
substantially
worse.
better.
Why
does it make them worse?
Because they're dishonest and they create a system which is stronger, right? We were talking about it earlier where it's like the Chinese take care of their people so that way they'll never revolt, right? Social Democrats are the exact same thing where it's like, oh yeah, if we give people more social security, we give people free health care, then they won't give a shit about what's going on in Palestine, right? I think that's even worse for the people. And again,
do you think that's the primary issue
right?
on the front minds of most voters? Like, do you think like the Democrats are thinking in their office, they're like, how can we continue the genocide in Gaza as long as possible?
No, it's not a debate. It's just they all support the genocide in Gaza. Like, the Democrats are looking for a better system which still is built off of massive injustice, right? None of them are talking about amending the 13th or changing the 13th Amendment to not include an exception for
crime.
Yeah, exactly. None of them are doing that. It's so funny how no matter who gets elected, we don't have free healthcare, even though our healthcare spending per capita is 2 times the next country, right? It's so inefficient.
Do people in America want free healthcare?
Yeah, 100%. Like, it's a very popular.
I mean, it is today, but like when it was up for debate, like, do you think Americans realized that they would want that? I mean, like, I think the Americans are getting what they voted for pretty on the nose. Like, people voted for Trump. He said he'd be a dictator on day one, and that's what he did. Like, they're getting what they voted for.
That's why we need revolution. Again, like, the voters are never going to be sensible. The voters in America are so misled. Education and literacy in America are so dog shit. Like, genuinely having half of America reading below an 8th grade reading level and 40% reading below a 6th grade reading level, it's like, Jesus shit. And no one's addressing these systemic issues. Who running for president said that, oh, we'll have free college for people? Because that's a popular one. Nobody. People get what they vote for, right? And they vote for slavery. They vote for genocide. They vote for exploitation because they don't have literacy, right? That's why we need a revolution. That's why we need to say, hey, fuck it. We're putting power back into the hands of the people. We're doing a democratic central structure. We're doing a one-party system where we have actual representation. Again,
you wouldn't have representation in a one-party decentralized state.
Yeah,
like, you'd have a guy speaking on behalf of the people and telling them what is the right thing for them to want. But it doesn't mean he would have to listen to them.
Then,
No,
I think we have
debate between two
China,
sides.
Oh, but the two sides are both funded by corporations, right? The donors are the same for both fucking sides. Oil money still goes into both. Israel money goes into both, right? Like, it's bad. Like, I used to be a social democrat. Like, I used to believe that we need reform. We need, first of all, like, free college, right? That's, like, the biggest thing. We need free, like, certifications for trades and things like that. And you know what I realized? That'll never fucking happen, because if we're educated enough, we'll realize that our representatives are terrible people. If we had comprehensive political education, people would know that there's genocide going on and that there's been genocide going on for hundreds of years in America. Like, I like the idea of liberal democracy, but in practice, it's just terrible. Like, genocide has happened, right? Again, the communists haven't committed genocide, right? Like, we can switch to a different. Oh, when? When was this? Tell me.
What do you mean? Which country? Like,
which socialist country committed genocide?
I mean, like, the Soviet Union punished the Ukrainians for not wanting to participate in their union. They did the same thing in Afghanistan. Like I don't like using the word genocide because it's kind of meaningless. But like, would you consider killing 1 million Afghans a genocide?
That again is far more nuanced. The Soviets weren't the ones killing them all, right? It was the Soviet-backed Mujahideen, right? That was the force that they were arming and supplying, right? How many Soviet soldiers went in there, right? Was it Soviet soldiers? Was it Soviet bombs? Sorry. It was Soviet bombs.
They had Soviet bombs.
Soviet huh?
I mean that's no different. Like that's like if America funds like the Contras and they go and execute a village of like little children or like it's no different if it's a U.S. soldier or like a proxy. Like Iran like funding their groups in Yemen, like sinking ships and causing billions of dollars of damage to international trade. You'd say, wow, why is Iran doing this? You wouldn't say, why is the terrorist group backed by Iran doing this?
But Chase, you're cutting out again.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, say that again.
Is this better?
Yeah, you're good.
For some reason, the closer I get my phone to my desk, the less it works.
Maybe it's like the metal blocking the signal or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's Israel.
But in Afghanistan, it wasn't a genocide. It was just war, right? It wasn't like, the Soviets were indiscriminately bombing villages. States does. They were just giving weapons and bombs to the Mujahideen, and they were giving them training, right? That's nothing compared to what we did in Vietnam. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because our soldiers were on the ground committing atrocities. When did the Soviets do that? And also, like, the Ukraine shit is always so funny to me because there's evidence of the Central Authority in the USSR trying to literally sending out food relief, right? Because the thing is, that famine that happened was real, right? 2 to 3 million people died in that famine, and it's a huge deal, right? The Soviets definitely had misuses of collectivization. The idea that it's intentional, however, is easily disproven, and I could send you.
I used to think the Holodomor was exaggerated. It's like it's clearly just a famine caused by Lysenko and having a top-down government where like, oh, you can't disagree with Stalin, so all the scientists telling him not to put crops in the snow were killed. but like when you look into it, they had cities where like you couldn't leave or you'd be shot, and they'd be taking the food from everyone in the city, and you're just starving. And they were specifically doing this to like the Kazakhstan people, the people in Ukraine, all the ethnic minorities that didn't want to be part of the Soviet Union, because like it's just punishment for refusing to play ball. I think it's clearly a genocide.
Do you have evidence for this?
I mean, what type of evidence are you looking for? There's
Primary
different types
sources, like documents of the time about like consent or census, like information about like the crops. Because you know what's funny? Of course, the Soviet Union didn't cause the drought that caused the famine, right? The famine happened not just in the Soviet Union; it happened areas all around because there was a drought.
It was exacerbated in areas that the Soviet Union didn't like, to ethnic minorities that Stalin hated.
Why do you think that? Who told you that? Where did you get that idea from?
Well, I just read like the Wikipedia article on the Holodomor and just read the main groups targeted by it, and I believe in Wikipedia, their mission, their project.
Do you know that the U.S. military is in control of them?
No. I mean, I can edit.
Exactly.
I can edit Wikipedia.
No, you can't. Well, you need to be an expert on the source you're talking about, and you need to have it peer reviewed. But also, The Pentagon has been proven to influence articles. They have the final say, right? Because it's a U.S.-backed company, right? Or a U.S.
Well, the Pentagon doesn't have a direct say, but I'm sure like everything in America has some sort of influence from the government.
Yeah, it's propaganda. I'm telling you this, like, Wikipedia is not a credible source because where are the primary sources, right? Where's the actual, like, mass graves? Because we talk about, like, oh, there was this famine. Where are the graves where people with bullets in their heads?
But we're not denying that there was
now that we have
a famine. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you before you finished your sentence. Because you said, where's the mass graves? You said there's a famine, and then you said, where's the bullets in the heads? Like, that, I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Yeah. Well, it's like you're saying that people would get shot if they tried to leave, but where's the evidence for that? Has there ever been
I'm pretty sure, like, when I was researching this a while ago, weren't there, like, Western journalists that tried to get in? And, like, the reporting from there? Like there's first-hand accounts from people who were there. Like,
yeah, because the Soviet Union allowed Western journalists in, and they didn't find mass graves. They didn't find these things that they're talking about. There was a famine, 100%. Was it caused by mismanagement? No, it was caused by the fucking draft, right? Was mismanagement a part of it?
Anti-science policies on farming.
Yeah, well, it was definitely not intentional is what I'm saying. I do think that the central authority made some massive mistakes.
It could have been corrected with feedback if feedback was allowed in the system.
They actually did have that. That's what the Soviets are. The Soviets are the independent worker states, which have their own representatives in the central authority, right? But the issue is that there are these... It's funny they didn't bring them up. It's the kulaks, right? It was the Ukrainian ruling class, right? The land-having agrarian people, right? Who were counter to the Soviet Union. They were saying, hey, we don't like the Soviet Union. So, you know what we're going to do? Burn fields down, right? We're going to make it as terrible as possible so that way people revolt against the Soviet Union, right? I just can't, nobody's ever, I've debated the Holodomor so many times. Nobody's ever been able to find a credible source to say it was intentional. And I have probably 30 sources on a note page somewhere. I mean, I can find it if you want. About, internal memos in the USSR that became classified at the collapse, which were basically saying, we need to send more food here. This is a travesty, right? And I don't think it was intentional mismanagement the way that you could say, it's funny they didn't bring up the famine in China, because that was very much caused by mismanagement, right? I don't think it was genocide because it wasn't intentional, but Mao's beef with the arrows was totally unfounded, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I didn't bring up the famine in China because that wasn't directed against... There wasn't specific ethnic minorities that were mainly affected by that. It's just... Millions of people died throughout the world during industrialization over the decades that it took to do that. China did that all in a couple years, so it makes sense that millions of people would die.
Yeah. It's the same thing that happened in the Soviet Union. There was mismanagement. I found evidence for mismanagement in my diving, right? Because I wanted to say, it was just natural causes. No, it wasn't just natural causes. The Central Authority did have bad grain out reallocation, right? The collectivization of farms in Ukraine was mismanaged, right? They didn't do enough studying, right?
It seems like the collectivization of farmland always is a bad idea. It didn't work in Vietnam. It didn't work in China. It didn't work in any of the countries where they tried collective farming. They always have to undo the collective farming initiative because farmers know how to farm.
Yeah,
farmers know how to farm.
That's exactly what I was about to say. Is it should be the farmers who run and manage the farms with guidance from central authorities. It should be farmers' unions that have the biggest say, and the farmers' unions should be a part of the government too, just so that way they get leverage in, the Congress, because...
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of the Khmer Rouge. They tried to just use pure ideology to change the culture. It's okay, we're going to take the factory workers and make them run the farms. That will make them into good workers that care about the community, and then they didn't know how to farm, and then everybody died. But that's just ideology pointing. Yeah,
it's definitely pragmatism. That's what I would say it was. It wasn't intentional. It was pragmatic. It was thinking. It was the Soviet, Industrial Bureau, whatever. I forget what the Farming Bureau was called in the Soviet. But it was the agrarian experts in the Soviet Union that were we should move this grain out of the country so we can afford to bring more machines in, right? That was the main thing, right? Is exporting grain right before the famine happened so they didn't have stockpiles of it. Completely bad economic move, but also they couldn't have known there was going to be a drought. And if there wasn't a drought, then it would have been a good investment. So basically, the central authority gambled with the lives of the people, and they made a misjudgment. And I'll say it was a really huge fuck up. Should not be looked at in a positive way. In fact, rest in peace to the millions who died, but I don't think it was a genocide or targeting of ethnic minorities. even though it was ethnic minorities most affected, of course. Like, I'm not going to deny that. I do just think it was misguided, the same way that Mao was misguided in the three pests policy.
I thought it was 4. Can't remember.
Yeah. Anyways,
it's like rats, mosquitoes, sparrows, and something. I forgot. Whatever.
Yeah.
If they would have killed the mosquitoes, that would have been cool, though.
That would have been cool, Jesus. But also, like, there's a little nuance to it where I had, like, a little understanding. Because bird flu was killing millions of Chinese people every year. And I think that's something that shouldn't have been let go on. And they didn't have advanced enough science to vaccinate for bird flu. So I think that if Mao Zedong hypothetically didn't get rid of all the sparrows, then there wouldn't have been the same famine, but Western media would be like, he let millions die to sparrows, the bird flu. I'm like...
Well, China is a natural disease hot spring. It's where most the global pandemics begin. They come from, like, the region.
100%. And that's why science is so important, man. That's why, again, I love China for having free college education and also having a meritocracy in education.
Isn't that ironic,
that's not
though?
necessarily... Huh?
I do think that's ironic, though, because I don't like ideology. I don't like having dogmatic, like, beliefs. Because, like, China, when they were trying to do their cultural revolution, they had, like, the PLA had no rank structure. It was, like, pure ideology run. And, like, their educational institutions were run by ideologues. So, like, they didn't believe in, like, Einstein's theory of relativity. They didn't believe in, like, basic, like, science that they blamed as, like, Western or Jewish or whatever. I feel like that's just, like, a problem you'll have if you, like, let, like, your entire, like, government be, like, focused on promoting an ideology.
100%. Like, I think that Mao Zedong was a great leader of his people, but in terms of being, like, a political strategist, not the best, per se. Because, I mean, the military was effective for a while, I guess. Like, I don't know. But it was based off of ideology. Like, the PLA soldiers would literally be helping farmers with their crops in the fields and everything.
Did you know that PLA in Korea had better equipment than the U.S. forces? Because when we pushed into North Korea, they didn't bring cold weather gear with them. But the PLA did bring... Yeah, the U.S. forces were fighting in their, like, summer uniforms and sub-30-degree temperatures against the Chinese. It's pretty bad.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that's a whole thing. But also, I think that I said this in the text very intentionally because it kind of helps highlight a lot of my other viewpoints. I'm very much in favor of the Chinese market reforms. Like, I believe that capitalism is a necessary stage in human development, and I believe that leaders like Mao tried to push human development before the productive forces were ready, right? Like, I think for a truly communist society, I think it wouldn't really be possible until technology advances to the point where nearly everything is automated. That way you can really have, like, a volunteer work system. So that's where China was, and the Soviet Union were, like, misguided, I would say 100%, is trying to force communist social and economic relations where they weren't ready, where the productive forces weren't built up yet. Like, same exact thing with the farmers, right? Because if they had, like, proper studies of agriculture in China before the famine, like, really good studies, they wouldn't have had the same issue, right? It was because they didn't have the development necessary to move past capitalism.
They also didn't allow for, like, people say the Soviets would like allow for top down or bottom up critiques, but, like, if the 5-year plan said this has to happen, it doesn't really matter if, like, oh, we're not producing enough of this or that. Like, they gotta, like, stick to the plan because it's top down command control. But it just makes it less flexible, and there's scientists, like, executed for disagreeing. Like, if like the leader likes one scientist and just trusts him more than the others, like, there's nothing you can do about that. Like, like, what are you going to do? Like, say, oh, the scientist you like is wrong, and he's going to lead us down a path that will lead to tons of people starving.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. You're just going to the gulag.
Oh, that's certainly why I favor China's modern political system over the one they had in the 60s through... Sorry, I meant like 50s through, I'd say, 60s, 70s. Because I think they actually embraced elements of meritocracy in government, where it's like, the reason why you're in government is because you're qualified, and the reason why you get promoted is because you're qualified. It used to be based off of ideology, and I think that that's very bad idea, as, you know, I think we agree on. But, yeah, like, my arguments for socialism and communism aren't because I'm just like, I hate capitalism so much. It's like, no, I think that these contradictions in capitalism, right, like that states usually represent the ruling class instead of the working class. That's a contradiction. Bosses want different things from their workers. I believe that as technology and science advance, that we'll be able to solve those issues where we can have like voluntary workplaces where you elect your bosses and things like that. Like, I think we can have democracy in the economy once we bring the economy to a level where it is so efficient that you can have people just not show up for work. You know what I mean? You can have a chunk of your population that's unemployed and it'll be fine. Like,
I mean, we could do that today. Like, there's a vast swath of jobs in the United States that are useless.
Yeah.
Like, we produce way more than enough food to feed everyone in the country. Like, we throw away 2/3 of everything we produce.
Yeah.
We produce enough oil to be self-sufficient, but it's just if there was a political will to do it, like if the people were like,
yes.
hey, let's set like and if they wanted to vote for that, I'm sure they could. That they'd be fine to do that. I don't think you need to have like a vanguard party. I don't think you'd need to suppress like dissent. Like, I think you could have people saying, no, I want to go back to not having food for everyone, and they probably would not win.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I advocate for revolution over reform, because I don't believe we'll reach that point without revolution, just because of how powerful the billionaire ruling class is. You know what I mean? Like, the wealth disparity itself is nuts. Like, that's something that I know you also want addressed. I just believe the best way to solve these issues of, like, wealth disparity, resource mismanagement, are through Marxist policy.
I think if we had more sensible policies, we would be in a better position. America had one of the most highest tax brackets in the world after, like, the Reagan stuff. Like, the top tax bracket of, 33% is ludicrous. I mean, for, like, hundreds of years in America, it was 90%, then, like, 74%. Like, during World War II, everyone over $200,000, every dollar you made was taxed like 98%. It was we used to be a lot stricter, and like I feel like the issues in today's society aren't, because like there was feudalism, and feudalism they were even poorer and even like less rights, but people survived because communities were intact and they had like social safety nets built into the community. As we shifted to an industrialized economy, I don't think you have to substitute those. All of the economists, like the Adam Smith types, were saying, hey, we're going to a new type of economy. We're going to need the government to give safety nets to like fill the role that the community would historically fill.
Yeah.
And I think just America chose the wrong path because of the oil crisis in the like 70s. People were panicking. They chose a guy, Reagan. He brought some short-term gains, which made the people have hope, and that kind of like set us on a bad trajectory. But there are countries where people aren't suffering as much. There's like where rights are better protected. I do think we need to control the media more, not like banning wrong speech, but like holding people accountable for spreading lies.
I'd say like hate speech and disinformation are the only two exceptions to free speech. You know what I mean? Where you're like actively saying like, oh, we should hurt this person, or this person should be hurt, or this, the earth is flat. I don't think you should be able to say that publicly. in your own home with your own family and friends, you should be able to say that, of course. But in public forums, I don't think you should be able to parrot hate speech and disinformation.
Yeah, like, it's kind of insane how America, like, it was a medical, one of the greatest medical achievements in modern history, creating the COVID vaccine in 100 days. And Trump was, like, trying to dog on that. But then, instantly, somehow they let the misinformation spread. I don't have no idea how that happened. Trump's cult actually booed him when he said to get the vaccine. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and it's really funny because I'm like, that's a very sensible thing from him, but yeah. Well, it's just so stupid when people are anti-vax because all of the science says otherwise. Like, no person in, like, epidemiology will say, like, vaccines are bad. It's like, no, there is sometimes risk of side effects, like, for sure. But, like, if you'd rather not get the disease, you should probably get the vaccine. And we need herd immunity, too. I feel weird about forcing people to take vaccines, unless there's science fully proven. Which there is for, like, all the vaccines. It's just that the initial Pfizer vax was actually relatively dangerous, and I don't think it should have been allowed on public market, much less required for certain things.
Yeah, the first batch did have a component. I forgot what it was, but the mRNA droplets are encased in, like, something that allows it to go into the cell. But I think that specific protein they used or whatever, like, caused, like, some negative side effects. But after one death, they pulled it from market and reformulated it. Yeah, pretty good. I do think it's funny when people mention myocarditis as, like, a side effect of the vaccine. Because, like, COVID-19 causes myocarditis, it directly infects heart tissue. So, it's like, the myocarditis that COVID will give you will last for years or months or whatever, but the myocarditis you get from the vaccine goes away after a day because it's just inflammation. It's just like the immune system responding. Anyway.
Do you think that, because of course you're saying that we should have, like, the electoral system and that's what we should do, but do you think that a transition towards a more socialist economic system would be a good thing?
I think that we need to restore the power of the government. The government's, like, kind of losing a little too much power. The capitalists should not have more power than the government. I think the point of a government is that it has the sovereignty, it has the monopoly on violence as a monopoly on power.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
I think China presents an alternative system that has proven itself, the only alternative system that's proven itself to Western liberalism. I think every other economic system has failed. Fascism failed spectacularly. It's brought the worst travesties in human history. I think monarchism and mercantilism and all the older systems are antiquated. I think the only two options we have today are liberal democracy and Chinese characteristic socialism. I think those are both viable solutions. I think the American system works for American people because we have a very individualistic philosophy tradition. We come from a line of thinkers going back to Thomas Aquinas, or like going back the line. We come from a Christian tradition, and the Chinese come from a Confucius tradition. Or they are more like that sounds kind of crazy, but like the framing that you set the discussion on thousands of years ago can shape the mindset of people thousands of years in the future.
Yeah, like totally.
So like their system works for their culture. Their culture has always been for a very long time about harmony and in line. Like they had the mandate of heaven, and I think the Communist Party of China has kind of taken the mandate of heaven upon themselves. Which I think is a good thing that they've shifted from that, because in the past they were trying to destroy Chinese history and say, we're moving on from that, that was all evil imperialism. But now they're like kind of embracing their past and saying, no, we are the mandate of heaven. We restored peace to the land. We are like the rightful heirs to this 5,000 years of history. And I think in the West there are countries that are doing it better than America that are following the liberal tradition. You have like Norway. It's like, hey, we have we protect individual rights. We value expression. We value, but they got lucky because they had oil. They had $1 trillion worth of oil that they put into the sovereign nation fund. And that's like the ideal version of the Western liberalism. So like if America became less Christian and less individualistic, you could see a more Chinese style country. But like in a Christian country with like that ideology of like everyone being like a unique sovereign individual, and it's like their value is like coming from God and not from their participation in community, then you could. But I think it's just the cultural incompatibility.
Yeah, I think that's a great. I mean, those are all great points, and I got a few counters. First of all, I was talking earlier about how I'm like, I prefer the current Chinese system of governance to the previous one. It's because meritocracy, but specifically what they call Confucian meritocracy, where they have this very strict system of you get elected to like your most local level, like your city or your town. And then from there you get elected to like, a few towns in the area, like being the like district. But the way you get promoted is by 5 years of proven success, right? That's how you get promoted. That's how Xi Jinping went to the top, was through 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, always moving up through proven success metrics. And let's like rewind to the point about basically like financial influence on government. There's this idea that there's political capital, which is, just political capital, and economic capital, right? What the Chinese learned from the collapse of the Soviet Union is that you must never allow financial capital to affect political capital, right? You never should allow finances from the open system to go into the pocket of politicians, right? Because that's exactly what the USSR did. Like, Khrushchev got a fucking check from Pizza Hut for doing a commercial and allowing them to do shit there, right? Versus the Chinese that are like, oh, no. So I think the only chance that American liberal democracy kind of moves past this phase of extraordinary violence is if we get economic capital out of political capital. What that looks like is a ban on lobbying, ban on stock trading, ban on like family member stock trading, and also basically incentivizing good service by keeping people in political power. Like, I think that you shouldn't be eligible for re-election if you haven't had like proven success in what you promised to your constituents, right? Like, Trump shouldn't have been allowed to run again because he didn't get the border wall done and he didn't replace Obamacare and things like that. I think that'd be a much more...
The Obamacare thing. He promised he'd have a replacement for that, like, and it's been almost 10 years and there's still no replacement.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's exactly what in China will get you barred from politics for life, is if you promise something like that and then you don't deliver. Like, it's funny, I don't think Xi Jinping is a dictator, because I think that if he did any worse at his job, he would get removed. And I think if he did, like, a catastrophic thing, like, the poor pests policy, I think that he would get killed. Like, straight up. I don't think that there's any leader in the world... this is a Joe Biden quote. Name me a single world leader who would switch places with Xi Jinping, right? Like, nobody would. Like, that is because they're held to merit. So I think even without kind of like the cultural like collectivism of like Eastern countries, right, like Vietnam and China, that had a more open approach to like collectivization, I think that those principles of like keeping economic capital out of political capital and also having meritocracy in government would be massively helpful. The problems that I just don't think that there's a way you can do that without replacing the government as it stands, just because things like the CIA would prevent the fuck out of that. Like, Kennedy got killed for flying too close to the sun, and flying too close to the sun was literally just inspecting nuclear facilities in Israel, right? Like, straight up, that's again why I don't believe in reform, is because there's these institutions put in place to prevent it. Like the CIA, like the DOJ, like the Pentagon, that have like lifetime membership, where it's like we could vote in all people who won't take lobbying in the next presidential, or the next 3 months. Jesus Christ. Midterms are coming the fuck, not 3 months. You know what I'm saying. If we voted in all the good people, then I don't think that our intelligence agencies would be happy, and I think in fact they would interfere like they have in the past.
I don't think the intelligence agencies are as powerful as they used to be, because every single CIA analyst for the Middle East told Trump not to invade Iran. They told him that killing the Ayatollah would just let the IRGC take more power and they'd be more extreme, and he just fired all of them. So like he just completely disregarded the intelligence community's assessments.
That's why Trump's so uniquely terrible, man. He's the worst.
He's not even good at being an evil capitalist, because the whole people, the CIA, their whole job is to help him maintain capitalism. They're like, okay, don't do this. It's going to backfire horribly.
Yep.
And he just fires them. He might be the most retarded person ever elected. I don't know.
You know what my honest take is? I think that he's a very useful idiot for some very powerful people.
This will be the end of part 1, and we'll pick up on the recording next episode for part 2.